Hello, and welcome to the USDA listening session for the Farm Labor Stabilization Protection Pilot Grant Program. Thank you so much for joining us today. To start us off, I want to inform you of some special accommodations available, including sign language interpretation and Spanish translations. You do have the capability to enable closed captioning by pressing the live transcript on the Zoom toolbar. Additionally, Spanish translation is available on the Zoom platform by pressing the interpretation button on the toolbar and by selecting Spanish. This webinar session is being recorded. A link to the webinar recording will be made available in the days following the broadcast to all registered participants and posted on our website, www.fsa.usda.gov/farmworkers, as you can see on your screen. We also encourage that all comments, including those that are provided today in the listening session, be provided in writing to the notice on the Federal Register via the Federal e-rulemaking portal. And you can see that link on your screen. It is www.regulations.gov/FSA 2022-0013-0001. And a link to that website, the Federal Register, and the Federal e-rulemaking portal are also in the chat. I'll start off by introducing myself. I am Dana Rogie. I am Farm Service Agency's Acting National Program Manager for Outreach. We have a jam-packed agenda for today's event. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Ann Kanapke, our Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy in the Office of the Secretary. Ann's going to provide us some opening remarks and discuss the Farm Labor Stabilization and Protection Pilot Grant Program. Ann?
Thanks, Dana. And thanks to all of you for taking time today to provide input through this listening session as we look to design this pilot program. When the COVID-19 pandemic first struck, we were given a wake-up call regarding farm workers. They were deemed essential employees, and the pandemic put a spotlight on the importance of this workforce and the contribution to our nation's food security. They work every day in fruit orchards and dairy farms in the blazing heat and freezing cold to ensure families have food on their tables. The pandemic also highlighted challenges of labor instability and shortages, challenges of irregular migration, and the need for increased labor protections, all challenges that we need to address in order to increase the resiliency of our food system and supply chain. Leveraging resources provided through the American Rescue Plan, USDA, in coordination with other federal agencies, is developing this pilot program to provide support for agricultural employers and implementing robust labor standards to promote a safe, healthy work environment for both U.S. workers and workers hired from Northern Central American countries under the seasonal H-2A visa program. We know that there are concerns with the H-2A program, and I want to acknowledge that. The reporting, recommendations, and engagement across the federal government on ways to improve the program. We know many of you have spent many hours over many years talking with agencies, publishing reports on structural changes, needed worker protections, employer compliance, stronger federal oversight. We appreciate that input and feedback. Here at USDA, this listening session is a formal process for input on this particular pilot program. It's helpful for the federal government and for USDA to hear suggestions in this forum in response to the questions posed. It's important that we hear from all of you to ensure that we design a program that is effective and impactful. I'm grateful for your time, participation, and perspective. I'll now turn to Ria Mehta, Chief of Staff for the Farm Service Agency. Ria.
Thank you, Ann, and thanks all for being here today. We appreciate you taking the time to share your perspectives with us. As Ann mentioned, I'm Chief of Staff at the Farm Service Agency. And for those of you who haven't interfaced with the Farm Service Agency yet, we have a presence in almost every county in the country and serve farmers directly. So with over our 2,100 state and county offices, FSA staff are directly interfacing with producers and ag employers every day. They hear directly from our producers about their labor challenges. So As an agency, we are particularly excited to be able to not just facilitate these listening sessions, but ultimately stand up this pilot grant program. We are hosting 3 listening sessions to ensure we have robust, diverse discussion and have ample opportunity for all our stakeholders who want to be heard. Earlier today, we heard from agricultural employers at 11 a.m. We're starting our labor union stakeholder session today at 2 p.m. And then tomorrow we will be hearing from advocacy organizations, Hill stakeholders, and other folks who are closely engaged on this topic. Information gained at these listening sessions and via the written comments to the Federal Register and other stakeholder engagement opportunities that we'll be engaging in over the coming weeks is all intended to guide the program development. There's a 30-day comment period to ensure that we receive full participation from all stakeholders, and comments on this pilot program will be accepted through October 24th, 2022. With all of this feedback, we will be working intensely to develop a grant program and anticipate the program will launch in the spring of 2023. We look forward to hearing from you all today. And just a reminder that these sessions are being conducted by FSA Outreach and the broader USDA team. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anne and Rhea. Before we get started, we'd like to briefly discuss how this virtual listening session will run and highlight a few housekeeping rules. First off, to reduce background noise and distractions, we do ask that your microphone be muted when you're not speaking, as well as your camera being turned off until it is your time to speak. We ask that you ensure your name appears exactly how you're registered on the screen to allow the host and, for me, the moderator, to find you when you're called upon to speak. If you need to change your name, find your name in the participant list and hover over it, hit more, and then rename and change your name as applicable. You have the option to activate the closed captioning, as we mentioned earlier, by looking at the bottom of your screen and turning on the live transcript icon. This is a listening session, therefore, we have disabled the ability to be able to have questions through the chat. The chat room has some links to our website and to the Federal Register and the Federal e-rulemaking portal, where we ask that your written comments be submitted. Additionally, the use of multimedia, PowerPoints, and other visual aids by registered speakers is not allowed. And once again, we want to emphasize that all comments should be made in writing at the web address shown on the screen and in the chat box for the Federal e-rulemaking portal. Again, that is www.regulations.gov/FSA 2022-0013-0001. Written comments will be accepted until October 24th of 2022. Attendees selected to speak online to USDA officials will have 5 minutes to present. Our host will locate your name in the attendee list, and when it's your turn, you'll see a prompt on your computer by the host asking you to unmute and to activate your video feed, and we do ask that you do both. Your video feed will appear spotlighted on the screen, and then we will introduce you and indicate that it is your time to speak. As the moderator, I will remind you that you have 30 seconds remaining by turning on my camera. When your allotted time to speak expires, I will turn on my microphone and ask that you conclude your remarks. Should your comments surpass 10 seconds, your microphone will be muted and video feed turned off. When your camera and microphone are on, please start by stating your name and affiliation, and then proceed with your comment. And finally, we noticed that we had a few folks who have joined us today via phone. So we'd like to take this opportunity at this point, if you could identify yourself if you are joining us via phone. If you could state your name and affiliation, that would be great. Once again, if you are joining us via phone, if you could please state your name and affiliation and organization.
Christy Boswell, Alston and Bird.
Great, thank you, Christy. Okay, With that, we are going to proceed to get started with the comment period. As you make your remarks, we do ask that you keep in mind these questions. And I think we're going to be pulling those up on the screen as well. First of all, we would like to know what barriers or challenges do farm workers, specifically those in Northern Central American countries, face in participating in the H-2A visa program? What do you recommend to enhance farm worker protections, including during the recruitment and employment? What methods do you recommend for enforcement and verification of those protections that will promote a safer, healthier work environment for both U.S. workers and workers hired from Northern Central American countries under the seasonal H-2A visa program? What suggestions do you have to help ensure compliance for any additional standards required by recipients of grants as part of this Farm Labor Stabilization and Protection Pilot Grant Program? And finally, what recommendations do you have to increase farm worker awareness of their resources and worker rights, both for workers within the United States and for H-2A visa holders in their country of origin? Okay, with those questions in mind, we will begin going through our speakers. We have identified a speaking order, and we will announce who is up first, and then we will say who is on deck. So our first speaker in the queue is Danny Jewell, followed by Diana Padilla. And following Diana, we have Rigo Rios. So we will call your name. If the identified speaker is not on, we will skip them and come back to them at the end. So with that, Kaylee, do we have Danny Jewell? Okay. How about Diana Padilla? Rigo Rios? Okay, up next would be Hewan Brindle Kim.
Hello.
Hello.
Oh, great. Well, thank you so much for this time. My name is Hewan Brindle Kim from the Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union, UFCW. Our union represents workers across the food supply chain around the country, from food retail, food processing, to agriculture. So in 2019, after decades-long fight, New York State gave agricultural workers the right to organize and form a union. It also granted workers the right to overtime pay, a day of rest, workers' comp, disability benefits, paid sick, and paid family leave. My union fought to win these rights, and last year we were the first union in New York State to be certified to represent workers in this state. Our union organizers are out in the field with agricultural workers every day and witness firsthand conditions in New York farms. If the idea is to solve a labor shortage issue by bringing in guest workers, we ask you to consider first how we can make agricultural work workable for farm workers in the US. After working through the pandemic and seeing the amount of work available in other higher paying sectors, people who have worked in agriculture for decades are turning away from their jobs. New York State needs a higher wage rate for workers. Employers should be paying overtime after 40 hours. Additionally, year-round workers who have made New York their home, have families here, attend church here, they complain about feeling like second class in farms with H-2A workers. For example, while H-2A worker housing must meet established standards and are regularly inspected, housing for the majority of New York farm workers have no oversight. Inspections of housing are left to local building departments who only get involved when housing is so unsafe, the building must be condemned. which only leads to loss of housing for workers. Access to the H-2A program should only be given to employers who commit to addressing these issues for all their farm workers. There must be a significantly higher wage rate. New York State has a $13.20 an hour minimum wage for upstate New York, and already has a $15 an hour rate in downstate New York, which includes Long Island. And New York is in the process of lowering the overtime threshold to 40 hours a week. And the USDA pilot program should be demanding significantly more from employers. Funds given out should be spent improving housing conditions throughout the farms. And USDA should require inspections by state agencies of all housing, not just migrant housing, and set competitive wages for all workers, including overtime pay. As a union representative of workers who have fought hard for the right to organize, we request that the H-2A program and any expansion of it not water down workers' hard-fought collective bargaining agreements. Honoring collective bargaining agreements and supporting workers' decision to organize to bargain for better, safe working conditions is critical. Supporting workers' right to organize should, at a minimum, include requiring H-2A employers to remain neutral in union organizing drives. In New York, we are seeing farms employing the same union busting tactics utilized by every other employer. No business that receives a leg up in their business should be allowed to intimidate workers for simply exercising their rights. The program should also make clear that farm workers living in employer housing have a right to have visitors at their place of residence. Access is a major issue. Farm owners prohibit outsiders on their property or make visitors check in at the office, both of which are a major obstacle to reaching workers to talk to them about their rights or even offer them services. The H-2A program should also require education both of workers and employers on what a union is and educate workers about their rights in the US and in the state where they are going to work. And the program should begin that education at the consular level in the worker's home country. While we want workers to trust government, the government should also partner with local community and labor organizations to be a resource for workers in need of help. The USDA should also increase funding to state agencies and community groups to help educate agricultural workers once they are in the country, and should require the workers receive regular, interactive Know Your Rights training, at minimum at the beginning of the season and midway through the season. And although I have more to add, I saw Dana put on her camera, I will close here. We will be submitting more detailed comments on this within the comments period. And I want to thank you again for this opportunity to provide my feedback.
Thank you so much, Hewan. We look forward to also receiving your formal comments through the e-rulemaking portal. Up next, we have Stephanie. Stephanie, and I don't want to butcher your last name here, Sepulveda. Stephanie, are you with us?
Stephanie Sepulveda, how are you doing?
Okay, great. Hey, your time is started, so go ahead.
Great, thank you. My name is Stephanie Sepulveda. I am the specialist on immigration and labor at the AFL-CIO. And to start off, I want to thank you all for your time and for including us in this process, right? Since the beginning of this pilot program, since the announcement, there have been major concerns from the labor movement regarding the program's design, its implementation, and the repercussions that it may have, both on U.S. farm workers and on farm workers who might come to the U.S. through the H-2A program. In particular, I think the reliance on a single partner to be the voice of the labor movement is concerning, right? It leaves out the diverse expertise of other unions and other stakeholders within the farm worker community that play important roles within the agricultural industry in general and within the H-2A program in particular. And we really want to emphasize the need to have direct lines of communication with unions and with other stakeholders that have dedicated their missions to helping farm workers in the US and abroad, and to kind of uncovering the structural deficiencies with temporary work programs in the US, and specifically the H-2A program. So as AFL-CIO, which represents many unions, right? We have a huge number of unions who are affiliated to us with a stake in this issue. We're really concerned about the lack of involvement that our unions have had in this process. And I think my sister earlier did a spectacular job of explaining the concerns that we have in our farm worker community in the US, and the concerns that we have with instead of helping the communities that exist here and using the resources to better conditions in the US, instead using them to bring in workers from other countries and through a program that does not give them a permanent path to staying here, but rather treats them as a disposable workforce. So our initial assessment is that there is an alarming lack of diversity in workers' voices present in the planning process. And this increases the risk of negative impacts on existing organizing efforts. It could have adverse effects on local workers and their communities, and adverse effects on the wins that immigrant workers and unions have made in this space. So first off, we think it's imperative that there be clarity on the process for involving stakeholders within the labor and farm worker communities, and that the channels for this communication be direct and effective. And now I guess I'll go a little bit into some of the key points that we're concerned about. First, we are very concerned about the effect that this program could have on existing collective bargaining agreements and existing organizing efforts, right? There have been big wins that unions have made in this space, and we're concerned with the possible effect that this program may have on localities where organizing efforts are ongoing, right? Bringing in a whole batch of workers from other countries might have negative impacts in the wins that workers in the US are having right now, and in their ability to advocate for themselves and to bargain with their employer. And I think this is something that USDA should keep top of mind as they think of ways to implement the program, and they should really consider bringing unions and stakeholders to the table, because the stake that unions have in different localities is different, right? No, the labor movement is not monolithic, and the experiences of different unions are essential as you begin implementing these programs. If the program fails to take into account the diversity of local experiences and situations, it will most likely bring confusion and chaos to localities with existing CBAs or organizing efforts. Having competing sets of labor requirements, for example, or labor protections may adversely affect the gains that have already been made. Another thing that is of top concern is how to guarantee labor protections for incoming workers, right? To this day, little has been done to increase the protections for workers in the H-2A program, despite well-documented patterns of abuse. The Blooming Onion case earlier this year is case in point, right? We know that the H-2A program is rife with possibilities for exploitation. It's rife with abuse. And without structural reforms to the program, we find it extremely concerning that this money will be used to expand the H-2A program. As you probably well know, workers in H-2A programs are tied to a single employer, and therefore they're denied freedom of movement, they're separated from their families, and they're more vulnerable to exploitation than other workers. At the same time, this vulnerability to exploitation affects the labor conditions and the labor standards for US workers who are already here. So instead of investing to better the labor standards of farm workers, which we all know is a huge need in this country, by bringing in workers from other countries under this H-2A program without structurally reforming it and making sure those vulnerabilities are no longer there, we're lowering the standards for all farm workers. And that's a huge concern to the labor movement and to unions. We're concerned that an increase in the number of H-2A workers through this pilot program without robust guarantees for labor protections will put these workers at risk of abuse and exploitation. And that's something that we've seen happen in the past. And we're concerned that increased numbers without actually understanding the vulnerabilities will just lead to more abuse in the future. The effect on the prospects of employment of local workers is also key here, right? The scope of this program is broad and it's intersectional, and you have to keep that in mind as you implement it, right? Its implementation will have significant effects on the lives of temporary labor migrants who come to the US, as well as on the lives of existing farm workers, right? So we have to ensure the safety and well-being of all workers, and that should always be the top priority throughout the design, the creation, and the implementation of this pilot program. And that means bettering the conditions for workers in the US as well. So unions should be at the negotiating table to help shape these protections and to ensure that this program does not undercut employment of local workers, nor that it negatively impacts wages in the industry. So thank you for your time, and we will also be giving our comments in written form as well.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. Our next speaker is Edgar Franks. Edgar, if you want to come on camera and unmute your mic.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Edgar Franks. I'm the political director for an independent farm worker union, Familias Unidas por la Justicia, based here in Washington State. I'll keep my comments brief, but our union has serious concern with this pilot program and with the use of the H-2A program in general, for many of the reasons that have already been mentioned. I was, listening into the employer perspective on this in the morning, and I think there was a lot of contradictions that were being said within their comments. They want the H-2A program to be a temporary, but also want it year round. I think this just points to the fact that they just want workers that are controllable, that don't have protections, and they can get rid of at any time. And it's something that has been really common here in Washington State about how we've seen the H-2A program being used. So that's been one of our concerns. Another one is about the implications of an expanding of an H-2A program. First, of what it does to wages. I think a lot of moves have been made by using the H-2A program to freeze wages. I think there's a lot of lawsuits that are on the federal level regarding this, about prevailing wages and how it affects local and domestic workers and discourages employers from hiring local workers, and in order to bring in H-2A workers where they can lower the wages. Nothing was mentioned on the employer side about giving the farm workers, whether H-2A or domestic, any kind of protections and the rights to organize in their workplace, whether or not they support a farm worker bill of the right to organize. There's also a lot of talk about housing and how employers want housing and resources and all this support to go into housing, but no talk of landlord tenants laws enforcement, about what are they going to do with the workers that are here now that need housing assistance. How come that's not being addressed as well? A lot of the resources and infrastructure that we've been seeing here in Washington State has been moving away from protecting the workers that are already here and getting moved into possible expansion of an H-2A program, which in Washington State has grown exponentially, almost at a 300% within the last 10 years. And again, I think because of the way we've been seeing, not only here in Washington State, but nationwide, how the H-2A program has proven to be exploitative under Operation Blooming Onion. I think the Department of Labor has come out with case after case of violations of worker rights, of human trafficking, and various other labor and human rights violations. An expansion or any kind of pilot program without any discussion or real efforts on protecting or addressing some of these injustices built into the program I think are very concerning. And our union takes the stance of opposing anything without any talk of protecting workers, whether domestic or at an international level. In our analysis and our kind of experience here, I think a lot of our members are also H2A workers. What workers want is not to be tied down to an employer, not to have their lives dominated, their transport, their how they eat, when they take breaks, where they live. They don't want that kind of vigilance and monitoring over their day-to-day lives, especially their status as workers shouldn't be depending on their employer. There is no freedom of movement, freedom of association within the H2A program, or in agricultural worker employment in general. So what we would want to see is something that's more just and fitting for workers everywhere, which, there's a plan to give residency upon arrival to workers, so then they have the freedom to choose where and which employer is fitting for them. I think we'd want to see that. We want to see more labor protection guarantees for all workers. We want equal opportunities for both domestic and H2A workers in housing and healthcare access. And again, and the rights to organize and to unionize, to protect the workers' lives and their families. So I think, yeah, and I think it was concerning to us also that this program would be monitored under the USDA. I think it's no secret that sometimes it's not fair to workers, the USDA, and we'd rather see a serious discussion on what that would mean, a USDA monitored program, pilot program. So I think these are some of the concerns from our union, and we will be writing these concerns and sending them in through writing. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Edgar, for those comments. All right, we have a few other folks who registered to speak during this session. I'm going to call out some names and see if they were able to join us. How about Valdemar Velasquez? Have you been able to join us, maybe perhaps by phone? What about Hector Gerardo? Okay, I'm going to circle back to some folks that we skipped earlier. Danny Jewell, have you been able to join us? Diana Padilla? How about Rigo Rios? Jeannie Economos? And one last call again for Valdemar Velasquez. Or Hector Gerardo. Okay. So those were the registered speakers that we had. Kaylee, if you want to pop up the slide with the websites again. Seeing as though we've called on all participants who indicated they wish to speak during this listening session, we want to give you a few more reminders as we wrap up this session. Again, please make sure that you submit your comments in writing on the Federal Register. That website is up on your screen now and in the chat box. Those written comments are due October 24th. A recording of this webinar is going to be sent to all registered participants, as well as posted online at our website listed on the screen now, fsa.usda.gov/farmworkers. We certainly appreciate your participation today for those who provided comments and who joined us to listen in. And with that, we will be concluding this session of our listening session. Thank you again for joining us.